Hello, everybody. This is Schiffer of the Kansas City Star, your Missouri beat writer. I'm joined alongside Blair Kerkhoff this week, who is fresh off from his return to Denver from observing Patrick Mahomes' Monday Night Heroics. This week we talk about Missouri's upcoming game against South Carolina and maybe get a little bit into the following week against Alabama and maybe even some basketball stuff. Hope you enjoy. All right, Blair, I don't know how much you watched of Mizzou's game against Georgia, but to me, this is a game against South Carolina that could do them a lot of good because it's a tough place to play, obviously. It's one of the best atmospheres in college football, but I think a win to put them at 4-1 going into Alabama should quash any talk of Barry Odom's job security and really kind of elevates what they could do for the rest of the regular season in terms of maybe finishing 10-2 or 9-3. 9-3 maybe a little more realistic just with the way Kentucky's playing right now. But I think this is a game that, given kind of how Missouri played against Georgia and left a lot on the table, this is something that they should come in with a chip on their shoulder, and it should be it should be an extra motivator for them given the way it went last year with them. So I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are going into this game.
Well, with the fact that it's a 1 or 1.5 point South Carolina favorites role here, suggests that it's even inside the home field advantage in terms of closeness, and it just looks that way on paper given the team's strength. I mean, Missouri looks a little better offensively, South Carolina a little bit better defensively, and so you've got a little bit of a contrast in styles, but. You mentioned something earlier about Barry Odom and where this game might fit into his future. I think when you look at those types of topics, it's always you find games, you look back on games that say, boy, if they had only won that one, maybe it would have influenced things in a different way. And you're right, this is a type of a game that Missouri kind of hasn't won in the past. I mean, under Odom and in the last few years under Pinkel, teams that went on to have good seasons. I think didn't I read something you wrote recently that Drew Lock hasn't beaten a team that finished with a winning record. So still looking for that type of a victory, and maybe South Carolina will provide it. They've had a tough start. I mean, they didn't play as well as they wanted against Georgia, and then lost to Kentucky last week, and it sure looks like Kentucky's emerging as the second best team in the division. But this has been a good rivalry, a good series. The games have been mostly close, mostly low scoring, and I think if Drew Lock, this is the kind of game where you sort of expect him, if he's going to be the guy that we've all thought he could be, a first round draft pick, an all conference quarterback. This is the game where he comes up big, and that's what I'm going to be looking for on Saturday.
I completely agree with you with Locke. If you remember, before the Georgia game, I had a story about NFL scouts saying that this 3-game stretch of Georgia, South Carolina, and Bama are going to really be a big mover for his draft stock and maybe even ultimately kind of cement him into a certain stratosphere of the draft, whether it's green room invite, first round, second round, something like that. And, the jury's a little bit out against how he did with Georgia. Some people think he was okay. Some people thought he wasn't very good. I personally thought that given the standard he's being held to, yes, they took away the deep ball, but he should, it's going to be in the NFL the same way where he doesn't have his best receiver or plays a tough defense and has to be able to do more with less, and that's what I was kind of thought was lacking. And given that he was underwhelming against Georgia, and with Alabama waiting in the wings, I think that this is a real chance for him to kind of stand out, like you said. And maybe with Kentucky being later in the season at home, he almost has a chance to kind of redeem himself from the Georgia game or kind of get a refund for his performance against Georgia because of Kentucky being top 15 right now. But I agree. I think this is a game that he absolutely has to kind of show more than just what we've been seeing.
Yeah, look, when you're talking about Drew Lock, if he had a really good game against Georgia, or if he has a really good game against Alabama, well then you look at everything differently. Then he goes to maybe top 3 in the draft or something. I mean, because who's going to have those types of games against 2 of the top 3 teams in the country that are solid defensively? When I look at what he did against Georgia, you're right. I thought Georgia did a really nice job taking away a lot of what Missouri likes to do, and Emmanuel Hall, of course, had he was a little banged up in that game, and so the weapons weren't there. And Drew Lock led an offense that scored 4 touchdowns, 29 points against Georgia, which is not unimpressive. He didn't throw a touchdown pass, but offense wasn't the issue in that game. Now turnovers were an issue. And it just, I wasn't there, but I was watching, and it really, if you were a Missouri fan watching that game, it just had to drive you nuts to see a punt blocked for a touchdown, and have the tight end have the ball ripped from him, taken back for another score, have a ball bounce off a receiver's shoulder pad and helmet for an interception, just a lot of stuff that drive you crazy in a game that I think Missouri matched up physically with, and that to me was an encouraging sign. The fact that Missouri, could move the ball on Georgia. They didn't have as many stops as they want, but they did move the ball on Georgia, and I was kind of encouraged by the running game. So I think that bodes well for Missouri going forward. A little bit, the running game has gotten a little bit better each week, and I feel a little bit better about that than we did going into the Purdue game a couple of weeks ago.
I think the run game is huge. I checked the other day. South Carolina's run defense is 92nd nationally, and obviously Missouri has 3 competent running backs in Crockett, Tyler Beatty, and Larry Roundtree. So I think that's a huge area where Missouri has to exploit on Saturday to kind of get the upper hand. We mentioned the Purdue game. I was going to ask you, I thought Missouri's defense, they gave up 43 to Georgia, but I thought the first half against Georgia was day and night from the Purdue game where I last saw you at. I mean, they were active in the backfield. Terry Beckner had a couple tackles for loss. They kept Georgia out of the end zone. All those touchdowns were, as you said, either the fumble recovery, the blocked punt, field goals, and both of those weren't the defense's fault. The defense only gave up 2 field goals, essentially. So, again, things get a little out of control in the second half when Georgia pulled away, but I don't expect them to do this against Alabama given the machine that the Tide are right now, but I felt encouraged by how quickly 1 week the improvement just week to week from Purdue to Georgia watching the defense.
Well, yeah, and that's what I meant by matching up physically, because I thought they absolutely matched up physically against Georgia, and that was going to be, again, that was my concern, and that speaks to not just having your guys in the right position, but recruiting the right guys. And so I don't have the stats in front of me, the total yards, but I think Missouri outrushed Georgia in that game, and by a little bit, and Georgia had a few more passing yards, but it was essentially even in the total yards category. And again, I think that's a pretty good sign. I don't know if many people would have expected that going. I think nationally that wasn't the idea or the perception of the game going in, that Georgia would be able to come in and push Missouri around. I always refer to odds. Wasn't Georgia a double-digit favorite in that game against the Tigers? And of course they ended up winning by double digits. Yeah, and how smart are the Vegas odds makers? It's a 14-point game, but the reason it was because of the turnovers, because Missouri did some dumb things, and you eliminate the dumb things, and that's, who knows what happens in that game. So it was, again, I'll go back. If you're a Missouri fan, you were kind of angry with the way that game unfolded, but you should also be a little bit encouraged too going forward that Missouri. I'll go back to what I've been saying all year. When you have a quarterback as talented as Drew Lock and you can match up physically with just about everybody on your schedule, I think that bodes well for your team, and you should be able to win the toss-up games. And there is no kind of greater definition of a toss-up game than what we're looking at on Saturday with the Gamecocks.
I agree. The big name with South Carolina, obviously, is Deebo Samuel, who torched Missouri last year both in the special team side and on offense. You're more the historian than me, but I kind of feel like with the way the kickoff return rules are going and the amount of touchbacks we're seeing, that the return man specialists like a Marcus Murphy or Devin Hester and Deebo Samuel, it's kind of becoming a bit of a throwback just because teams would rather take the touchback than risk what happened in Missouri last week with ball security and everything. So he's one of the rare times that they're facing somebody, I guess a little bit with Purdue and Rondell Moore, that they have to worry about where they're kicking it to and how they're handling their coverage area. And this is where we're going to see what Andy Hill's made of. But I'm kind of curious what you think of Deebo Samuel. And also, I think Jake Bentley is a very underrated quarterback in the SEC. I thought he was very impressive his last 2 times against Missouri. You hear about Drew Lock, you hear about Jarrett Stidham, Tua obviously at Alabama. I think Jake Bentley kind of gets a little underrated just based on the amount of quarterback talent in the SEC this year.
Yeah, it's a very good year for quarterbacks in the SEC, and in other years he'd be mentioned among the better ones. But that's just there's so many this year that it's not the case. But I think they're pretty happy. They're pretty happy with him. He's completing about 64%, and so I think for what South Carolina does offensively, he's fine. Deebo Samuel, I can't remember the game, but he's thrown a touchdown pass this year in addition to everything else that he does. He's just such a terrific all-around athlete, and in the mold of and I think I want to say this. I believe he's a senior this year, so you've got an experienced guy who kind of knows what he's doing on the field, who's a terrific athlete. And you mentioned Rondell Moore, the Purdue wide receiver. He is. I can't say enough about him. I think he's certainly next level talent, and maybe as good at his position as anybody in the country. But Missouri's just always gonna have to keep an eye on Deebo and hold him in check as much as they possibly can. I called up his stats. He's got 22 receptions and a couple of touchdowns this year, but we know what he's capable of doing. He's a big time player.
He reminds me a little bit of Jordan Matthews in college at Vanderbilt, just where he's capable of getting 100 yards receiving in the game. You just need to kind of keep it to that as low as you can. He's going to go off, but you just have to contain him as best you can. You're not going to fully stop him. You're not going to hold him catchless, but you just kind of have to do damage control with him.
And it looks like they're kind of running back by committee too. There's nobody who's piled up the big numbers this year, but and their longest run's only been like 29 yards. So again, it's sort of a when you think of South Carolina historically, and at least in the as I followed them in their SEC years, they don't beat you with their offense. I mean, Spurrier, when Spurrier was coaching, he tried to change that, but it's Will Muschamp is a defensive minded guy, and that's where they're trying to build their brand is on the defensive side, and and they do have a good pass defense. I mean, they're holding I think opponents under 50%, opposing quarterbacks under 50% completion rating this year. I could be wrong on that, but I thought I saw that. So it's going to be difficult to in that environment against that defense, and you know how it goes when you go into an SEC stadium against a good defensive team, how the crowd enters into the game. And I don't know if you've been to a game at South Carolina at Williams-Brice Stadium, but it is one of the louder crowds. When that place is full, it's as good as atmosphere as there is. And not only they're loud, they're loud and have an edge to them as well. And it's also, you'll enjoy this, it's one of the great entrances in college football when South Carolina comes on the field. So a neat atmosphere, probably one of the underrated atmospheres in college football, and one of 2 or 3 press boxes that actually sways, that actually moves during the game because of the fans, the way the fans move. So you'll have a good time there.
No, I'm looking forward to it. It's one of the only SEC schools I haven't been to, and Missouri was actually playing Sandstorm today at its practice. That's the main song that South Carolina plays in games. So no, I'm looking forward to it for sure. What's your prediction? What do you think happens?
Well, because I'm always kind of wed to my my preseason projections. Something crazy has to happen for me to move off of the 8-4, and I had them at their record now is where I had them, doing what they've done, including the loss to Georgia, but I had them beating South Carolina. Now, once we get to like Kentucky, I'm going to have to amend things, but maybe. But I had them winning this game, and I had them being better than South Carolina this year. And I don't think I've seen anything from South Carolina that leads me to change that. So I think South Carolina. I think this is a game that's equally important. So I don't know if there's an advantage there. The Gamecocks had they were one of the schools that lost a game to the Hurricanes a couple weeks ago. So you don't know how that's affected them. They turned around and beat Vanderbilt and then lost to Kentucky last week. They're 2-2, and they've kind of done what they've expected to do, although nobody's expected Kentucky to play this well. I think South Carolina looks at this game as a victory opportunity for them with Florida, Clemson left on their schedule. I think they look at this as a game that they probably pointed to in the preseason as a W. But I know I felt that way about Missouri. When you have the advantage at quarterback and you can match up physically with teams, I think you ought to win the game. And so I'm gonna pick Missouri in something of a low scoring game, which has been the history of this series. I'm gonna go like 24-20 Tigers.
That's pretty close to what I have. I agree with a lot of that. I think Missouri feels kind of gypped last week, especially, the offense and the defense. They both did a decent job, and it was the little things that kind of prevented them from giving Georgia a real run. And I think they all know kind of what's waiting for them at Bama with that buzzsaw in Tuscaloosa, and they don't want another 3-game losing streak like the long one they had last season. So I think they do come out of there with a win. It is a low-scoring series. I'm going to say 27-20 or so. It's still pretty low scoring, and I think we see a better performance out of Drew Lock for sure. Before I let you go, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, I was just going to say it would. I think we'll feel differently about Missouri's season if they go down there and get a win. Not an easy place to do, and I think we'll. I don't know if that'll encourage anybody to think they have a chance against Alabama, but I think in games later on the schedule, you'll take a look and say, yeah, they when the schedule kind of softens for Missouri, that when they went to South Carolina and won, that would have been a kind of a barometer game for the Tigers. Hey, it's Blair Kerkhoff, and if you're listening to this, you love Kansas City sports, whether it's the Chiefs, Royals, Sporting, Mizzou, KU, or K-State. And no one covers these teams like the Kansas City Star. If you currently subscribe to the paper or have a digital subscription, thank you for your support. And if you don't, here's a great offer. It's called Sports Pass, unlimited digital access to every sports story and video on kansascity.com. And it's just $30 for the first year. It's the best sports value in town, just 8 cents a day or $2.50 a month. You can't beat that. Subscribe now at kansascity.com/sportspass.
They'd be 4-1 going into Alabama. Do you think that would, if they win, do you think that'd be enough to get them ranked or receiving votes?
Well, aren't they? They're receiving votes now, aren't they? Aren't they in the?
A little bit, yeah. Not a lot. Nothing that would have gotten them close to being ranked last week, obviously with Georgia. But they're receiving some votes, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll get them up the ladder to receiving more votes. And let's just assume a loss at Alabama. Then you win a couple of games on the other side of that. Then I think you'll see Missouri in the top 25. Maybe if they can beat Memphis and then but by the time they play Kentucky, who knows where the Wildcats will be? They're in the top 15 now. So win that game, and I see Missouri in the poll if they go 3-1 in their next 3.
Last thing I want to get your thoughts on, being the historian for college sports around here. Missouri lost its top target for basketball last night, E.J. Liddell, committing to Ohio State. And it's been interesting to me. I'm the recruiting guy. I thought some fans seem more at peace with it than others. Liddell was a top 40-ish recruit. He wasn't in the same stratosphere as Michael Porter Jr. or Jason Tatum and some of those local recruits that Missouri, they got Porter after losing him to Washington initially, but Tatum and everything. And some people kind of feel like this is a bit of a chink on the armor for Cuonzo. And other people say, he was top 40. Missouri historically has done better in the top 50 to 70 range. And it's no big deal. I'm of the opinion that it would have been a big deal for Cuonzo, and it is a bit of a big deal because all the guys they've gotten out of St. Louis since Cuonzo got the job have been, I call them second-chance recruits. They were transfers like Mark Smith from Illinois, decommitments or coaching changes like Jeremiah Tillman and Javon Pickett at Illinois as well, and then Torrance Watson was an Ohio State decommit. He flipped. Mario McKinney was a guy that they got to commit out of St. Louis right off the bat, and I think it's good PR given that his cousin played there, and Missouri fans are all hung up on the relatives of former athletes like Ezekiel Elliott and Victor Bailey Jr. and all those guys.
And Booker.
And Devin Booker, yes. I knew it was Tyler Hansbrough's father ran track there. So I think that was a good PR move in that sense, but I'm curious for your thoughts on it, being doing this longer than me, because I do think that there is a little bit of, this was a more gettable recruit than a Tatum or a Porter or a Bradley Beal, whereas, he was top 50-ish. And, Ohio State's a good program, but they're kind of in the same boat as Missouri a little bit with a newer coach, had a surprise year last year. And obviously, though, and the Big Ten is Michigan State, Wisconsin. I feel like the SEC is still an easier conference to win in, even though there's been an uptick in talent and money put into basketball in recent years.
Well, I was interested in reading your story about this, and I picked up a few things that we're talking about. One, Liddell talked about how he was a lifelong Ohio State fan, dreamed of wearing the Buckeyes football jersey, and then his body grew into a basketball player, so he said, I'll just wear the Buckeyes basketball jersey someday. So maybe it was a done deal his whole life, and he just and he wanted to go through the recruiting, the recruiting with Illinois and Missouri and others who showed a lot of interest in him. And maybe they never had a real chance at him. Who knows? I mean, only he knows what's in his heart. And but there is. You make a good point about there was a relationship there in the past, not just a St. Louis relationship, but Cuonzo and going back with was it his coach? Who Cuonzo went back and there was a relationship there.
Yes, he grew up with Liddell's father in East St. Louis.
That's it. Grew up with his dad, and so yes, you sure like to think that there is an opportunity there. I can remember when gosh, I got to go back now. Anderson at Missouri was not Kim.
Mike Anderson.
Mike Anderson. When he got the Pressies, it was because there was a family connection there, and sometimes it works out that way. That there are, you get guys because of that, but you don't always get them. And you mentioned Ezekiel Elliott, and with his dad and mom both going to Missouri. It doesn't always happen. And Missouri, maybe as much as any school in the country, talks about, and specifically for basketball, for all sports, but for basketball. Targeting and really needing the largest metropolitan area in its state, in St. Louis. And every coach that I've ever dealt with at Missouri has spoken to that. And it seems like Cuonzo's in the best position to make it happen because of his background. And I think we just need to give him more time and opportunity to make the associations and the connections with the grassroots basketball coaches and the parents, and getting to know the right people. I'm sure he knows a lot of these people already, but you know what? It's not because of Cuonzo that they don't get him. I think it's still because of, Missouri. Missouri just needs to be better in basketball and have some success on the national level. That was, that they started that last year and got to back to the NCAA tournament. I think it's just going to take a succession of years of success to raise the profile of Missouri in, with recruits. Look, Ohio State hasn't been great shakes in the last few years, but this guy had an emotional attachment to Ohio State, and I think that's why he ended up there. Missouri needs kids with emotional attachments to Missouri, and one of the ways you get that is by becoming a Missouri fan when you're a kid and you grow up going to games and you watch them on TV all the time, and you can't think of yourself in any other place but there. And if you're from St. Louis or Kansas City, you kind of hope that that's what Missouri is to those kids. And it hasn't always been that way in this state. But I think with Cuonzo Martin, they've got a chance for that to happen in a greater way than it has happened.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that could help that is all the local guys from St. Louis that are currently on the roster, it's like 6 or 7, I think there'll be more of a local draw to watching Missouri, given that a lot of those guys are from the area, grew up playing there, and all the relatives, all the friends, all the coaches, all their players will be drawn to watching those teams. So if they take care of business, that could change the equation. Quick trivia question for you.
Go ahead. What do you got? I was going to say, and maybe grist for another day is why we can talk about why St. Louis is so dominant when it comes to basketball prospects over Kansas City, which turns out the occasional, Kevin Puryear and others, but St. Louis just dwarfs this side of the state when it comes to grassroots basketball. Yeah,
we should make that a podcast. That'd be good. Here's your question. Liddell's father, Eric, was an offensive lineman for Illinois State back in the late 80s, early 90s. Who was his quarterback's coach and assistant offensive coordinator while at Illinois State?
It wasn't Shane Zinger, was it?
No.
Shane Zinger was at Kansas State then, but then he went to Illinois State. The Kansas athletic director. That's a good one. Who would it have been?
Urban Meyer.
Oh, how about that? That also it speaks to the connection.
Yes, I don't know. He would have been suspended while Liddell was on his official visit, but I always thought that was an interesting connection there that wasn't really discussed that much. I thought you'd have a chance at getting that though.
No.
Was that a name that came into your head or not?
No, it wasn't, because I don't pick up Urban Meyer until he gets to the MAC. But that's a good one though. That is solid.
Nice. I'm glad I stumped you a little bit. I got to do more homework on this stuff.
I think Urban Meyer. Correct me. No, maybe I better not ask this without exactly knowing the answer to this. So I'll tell you what. I'll have one for you the next time we chat.
All right. I like it. We can make this a weekly thing.
There we go.
That's going to do it for us. I'm Alex Schiffer. He's Blair Kerkhoff. I will be with Sam Mellinger in Columbia, South Carolina on Friday. And we will have plenty of coverage from the game, 11 a.m. kickoff Central Time, and we'll be going live to discuss the result of that game and Missouri's upcoming game against Alabama then. Thank you for tuning in.